Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for joining me. My name is Lisa and this is Most Highly Guided. Thank you so much for all your views and likes and subscribes. I really do appreciate it. I've been looking at my channel to see like who watches and stuff, and actually the majority of people that watch aren't subscribed, so thank you so much for passing through. If you do like the channel, then please feel free to subscribe. I would feel completely, let me just move this camera back guys, completely blessed to have you join us. Thank you so much. Right, next chapter, Return of the Gods. That's what we're going to do today. On this video I'm going to go through quite a lot of chapters because they're quite small in this book, so I'm going to get a good chunk out of there because otherwise it'll just drag on for ages and I'm sure everyone will just lose interest. So we will get quite a few out there today and see how it goes. So let's just jump straight in guys. Chapter 33, Night of the Goddess. If you would like to see the other series that I've put on from this book, then please go find them on the channel. I am at some point going to put them into playlists, but I haven't done that yet. So until then, just look for the Return of the Gods. So, my throat is just all over the place. Let me take a sip. I've had quite an illness go around this house, so I'm just hoping I don't come down with it. So excuse the voice. Right. Night of the Goddess. The return of the goddess could be discerned from the beginning of the sexual revolution, but what we are about to see is how a single event would embody her entrance into the modern culture in a way no other event ever had. More than any other, this one event could open the door for the altering of values in the realm of sexuality, marriage, gender, family, even the Bible, Christianity, and the ways of God. Stonewall. It would be known as Stonewall. It would come to be commemorated every year in nearly every part of the globe. It would represent an explosion that would begin a leavening through American culture, Western culture, and then the world. Is it possible that this event was not only a conflagration of social unrest, disorder, and upheaval, but of spiritual forces? Is it possible that behind all was the spirit of the goddess and her mythology? What is now known as Stonewall or Stonewall riots or Stonewall uprising took its name from Stonewall Inn, a gay bar of Greenwich Village in New York City. As with other gay bars in the city, it was owned and operated by the mafia. In the late June of 1969, the police raided it. Such raids were not uncommon for several reasons, beyond the fact that homosexual acts were not legal. The bar was operating illegally without a proper liquor license. The bar owners would typically bribe the police to allow them to function, and the police, on their part, would often alert the owners before carrying out a raid. Oh dear. If my eye twitches, guys, I do apologise, but I've been suffering cluster headaches. So if you see my eye twitch, I'm not some weird thing from another planet. It's just I've been suffering cluster headaches and this eye just sporadically twitches. It's making me very self-conscious, so I do apologise. Right, explosion. The raid began in the early hours of the night. There was an estimated 200 people at the bar that night. During the raid, the police cleared most of them out and focused their efforts on the bar's employees and a number of cross-dressers whom they pressed for identification. Soon they began loading some of those they had kept for question into a police van. The multitude of patrons remained standing outside along with curious onlookers. During one of the arrests, something took hold of the crowd. An agitation. An agitation, then a spirit of rage, then explosion. The crowd started taunting the police officers and then hurling objects at them, bottles, rocks, and reportedly bricks. The rage was so fierce and the situation so dangerous that the police retreated into the bar, barricading themselves in fear of their lives. The crowd then came after them, charging the bar, attempting to break open its front door to get to them. Eventually came help for the barricaded police, but the rage and uprising went on. The Stonewall riots continued for days. At the time, it appeared as an oddity, a disturbance on the fringes of society. Most people had no idea it had even happened, but the repercussions of what happened that night would grow and deepen with the passing of each year. In time, those joining the commemorations of Stonewall and the movement it represented would number in the multiplied millions. Ancient doors and spirits. We have spoken of the door that closed to the gods in ancient times. Stonewall was the key of its reopening. In view of that, it should come as no surprise that it was an event of rage, upheaval, and violence. The ancient door was now being pummeled and forced to open. Spirits were entering in, and gods were returning. And so, with regard to the realm of spirits and gods, what took place at Stonewall was of great significance. And it was not only the police and the multitudes who were there that night, but in the midst of the crowd was the goddess. What happened that night went beyond the natural realm. Those involved in it, no matter what they were on, had no idea. They were only vessels or pawns in an ancient mystery. We are now going to pull back the veil on what took place on that June night in New York City. Behind that veil, we will discover another realm, a world of convergence of spirits and flesh, the ancient world and the modern and mythological and the real. Was there a reason what happened that night had to take place in New York City? And is it possible that the reason goes back to the goddess and her mythology? Chapter 34, The Wondrous Gate. The return of the goddess had ushered in the sexual revolution, but the revolution that was now about to begin would require its own entrance. The goddess would need a portal through which to enter and by which to bring back into Western civilization that which had been kept out. She would need to come to the gate. Ishtar at the gate. Ishtar had always been drawn to gates. Among her most prominent symbols was a pair of standards referred to as gateposts, and one of the most famous of all archaeological remains is that of Ishtar, the Ishtar gate that opened the way to the city of Babylon. So too, gates played a central role in her descent to the underworld. She demanded their opening. She would open them one way or another. It was her nature. She was the trespasser of boundaries. What she was now about to force open was a long closed door, the locked gateway of Western civilization. She would have to come to the gateway to do it. In the late 20th century, America was the leading power of Western civilization and of what could still be called Christian civilization. She would come to its gateway. The goddess in New York City. America had one gateway above all others. It was the gateway through which millions entered and departed the nation, and through which trade, commerce, commodities, culture, and ideas poured in and out. It was the gate by which its most iconic statue lifted up its lamp beside the golden door. The gate was, of course, New York City. So the goddess, who in ancient times was always drawn to the gate, would now, upon her return, come to the central gate of American and Western civilization, New York City. An offering of first fruits. One of the ancient inscriptions of her mythology tells of how she approached a wondrous gate. In the evening she came forth with authority and stood in the street before the wondrous gate. She made an offspring of first fruits. So now again the goddess would come in the evening and stand in the street before America's wondrous gate, New York City. In the myth, she makes an offering of first fruits. First fruits refers to an offering or sacrifice that marks a beginning. So the goddess would now lift up her offering at the gate of America, the first fruits, the beginning of a movement that would transform American culture and the world. So there, at America's gateway, she would begin the opening of an ancient door. It would not open freely, but she was the goddess who boasted of the power to force open what had been closed to her. Open your gate. In the mythology of her descent to the underworld, she stands at the gate and calls out, "Gatekeeper, ho, open your gate that I may enter." She would not be kept out. So in the summer of 1969, the goddess came to the gate and to Stonewall. That night, her spirit would indwell the multitude, who would then demand that long close the door be opened to them. That night, it would all begin, and the movement that would transform world culture would begin, as it had to, at the gate. What is Ishtar? And could it have pinpointed the exact location in which the explosion had to take place? The Ishtar. Ishtar dwelled in a place called the Ishtar. What is it? The tavern. Ishtar was an ancient Mesopotamian word for tavern, pub, or inn. The tavern was especially linked to the goddess. She was the protector of the Ishtar, the patroness of taverns. Of the goddess's special relationship to the tavern, one writer observed, From this point and into the first millennium BCE, the tavern or alehouse was Inanna, Ishtar's special province, and one that she personally safeguarded. The ancient hymns that sing her praise make a point of noting the connection between the two. Of noting, oh my, come on, Lise, get a grip. Make a point of noting the connection between the two. The goddess sits in the Eshdam and there makes her living. The connection between the two was so strong that Eshdam could be seen as her home, one writer notes. It may be that images of her home, as the tavern was sometimes called, automatically enlisted that aspect of Inanna, which specifically protected the local pub. The Stonewall Eshdam. The goddess not only dwelled in the tavern, but would use it for her purposes. So upon her return to the modern world, it was not only that she would enter by the gate, but she would be sure to find an Eshdam, a tavern to use for her purposes. And so it was no accident that on the evening in the last days of June 1969, the workings of the goddess would converge, as they had in ancient times, on an Eshdam. In this case, the Eshdam was called Stonewall. Stonewall was the fulfillment of ancient Mesopotamian word. It was a tavern, a bar, and an alehouse. It was a natural setting for the goddess's dwelling and workings. There was hardly another place on earth more fitting by which to make her entrance. It had to begin there. Ishtar's, it says House of Ale. Ishtar's ancient Eshdams were known for one alcoholic beverage in particular, beer. The word can be more specifically also be translated as beer house or ale house. The goddess dwelled in the house of beer. So Stonewall was especially known for one beverage above all others, beer. Visitors described it as being heavily saturated with the smell of beer, so as soon as one walked through the doors, one was met with the aroma of Eshdam. Beer was so central to the sacred libations offered up to Ishtar and the gods. Fermenting vats were used in religious rituals, spells, and incantations. The liquid was believed to possess magical powers. The Eshdam alehouse was believed to be supernaturally charged space in possession of the goddess. So on that hot summer night of 1969, the Eshdam would again become supernaturally charged and possessed by the goddess. House of altered gender. Another element of the Eshdam was sexuality. The goddess confessed to using the Eshdam to procure sexual relationships. So at Stonewall, the element of sexuality was ever present. It was the issue of sexuality that distinguished Stonewall from most other bars in the city. And it was that issue of sexuality that ignited the explosion. The goddess connects her altering of gender to a particular place. When I sit in the alehouse, Eshdam, I am a woman and I am an exuberant young man. Thus, in the presence of the goddess, an Eshdam became the place where the lines of gender were blurred and broken, and where the nature of sexuality was altered, where a woman became a man and a man a woman. And so it was with Stonewall. With Stonewall. It was the Eshdam where the lines of gender were blurred, crossed, and broken. It was the Eshdam in which sexuality was altered, from which that altering would spread to the world. Judgment House. The Eshdam would play another role in Ishtar's mythology. The holy Inanna, Ishtar, made enter, it says her in brackets, Eshdam. She stood in judgment, decreed their fate. The goddess is described as entering the Eshdam or alehouse to bring vengeance. The Eshdam thus becomes the goddess's ground on which to redress her grievances, punish offences, and exact retribution. On the night the riot began, the Eshdam of Stonewall again became the site where offences were punished, grievances readdressed, and scores evened. That night, the multitude, inflamed by the spirit of the goddess, attempted to enter her Eshdam and stand in judgment against a civilization they believe had sinned against them. Go down to your alehouse. One Mesopotamian text says this of the goddess: Harlot, you go down to the alehouse. So in the summer of 1969, the goddess known as the Harlot went down to the alehouse. Ishtar went down to Stonewall. Though it might come across as strange to Western ears in ancient Mesopotamian texts, the word for tavern or alehouse is at times joined to a Mesopotamian word for holy. The goddess is spoken of as possessing the holy Eshdam, the sacred alehouse, and the holy tavern. The tavern became something akin to her temple, hallowed ground, and so the bar known as Stonewall would become enshrined as a holy place. It was no accident the movement that disseminated the ways of the goddess would hallow as its sacred shrine its temple. Stonewall, its sacred alehouse, the holy Ishtar. There was more to the goddess's dwelling place, or Ishtar. One more element from her mythology was needed to complete it. It would be there at Stonewall, and it would play a central part in the explosion of that night. So we've got the house of Harimtu. Sorry guys, I'm butchering it, just in case you want to know and make it up for yourselves. I know we pronounce things different in different languages or way, depending from where you're from, but yeah. Ishtar was goddess and patroness of taverns and prostitutes. We would therefore expect the two to come together. The alehouse harlot. In one of the Mesopotamian myths that speak of her powers and possessions, the goddess is told, "You have brought with you the cultic prostitute. You have brought with you the holy tavern." She was in charge of the prostitute and holy tavern. A goddess of Harimtu, or prostitute of the Eshtam, or alehouse. Ishtar was the embodiment of both. She was the Eshtam Harimtu, the alehouse harlot or tavern prostitute. In one of her hymns, the goddess says this: "When I sit by the gate of the tavern, I am a prostitute." Here, the three elements of the goddess converge: the gate, the tavern or alehouse, and the prostitute. The tavern, if not an official house of prostitution, was a house in which prostitutes dwelled and operated. The Stonewall prostitutes. So, could the other element of the goddess, that of the prostitute, also have manifested in the night of Stonewall? On the night of Stonewall? It did. Talk and rumours of prostitution had always surrounded the bar. There were reports of a prostitution ring being operated on the second floor. There were even reports of prostitution taking place within the bar itself. But beyond that was Stonewall's other and more visible link to prostitution. The tavern had become a centre, a haven and gathering place for the male prostitutes, sex workers and street hustlers of Lower Manhattan. The prostitution over which Ishtar presided in ancient times was not confined to female sex workers. The functions of the Asinu, Ishtar's feminized males, undoubtedly overlapped into the realm of functions of prostitution. A Sumerian inscription describing the goddess's festival says this: "Tightening their hair grips for her, the male prostitutes parade before her, holy Inanna. Their locks of hair at the back are adorned for her with coloured rags." The Harimtu revolution. Not only were male prostitutes a central part of the Stonewall Inn, but they actually led the upsurping. One of the most prominent leaders in that uprising, and in the movement that followed was a drag performer named Marsha Johnson, who worked at night as a male prostitute. She was one among several others. So on that summer night at Stonewall, the two elements, the Harimtu and the Eshtam, the prostitute and the alehouse, converged just as they had converged in ancient times under the patroness of the goddess. That night, the goddess's modern-day Asinu, her male prostitutes, were there on the streets, gathered around her modern-day Eshtam to ignite the explosion. So the movement that would transform Western culture was started by prostitutes, just as it was begun by the prostitute goddess, the alehouse harlot. But why Stonewall? Was there, as opposed to other taverns or alehouses? Was there something more to it? Is it possible that the answer lies in ancient tablets that pinpointed Stonewall as the place in which it had to happen? And then the next chapter is Stonewall, which I will save for the next video so we don't make this one too long. Plus I have to kind of fit it in a title so you know what it kind of covers. So that was Return of the Gods. I really do find that book interesting. I mean, of course you can go and Google Stonewall yourself and have a look exactly what happened there. And, you know, see for yourself. But it's also very interesting how these things came about and how it affects like modern culture and the way that things are going. There's always, you know, like one, like it says, one gate that opens and allows these things to come in. So I find it extremely interesting. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I really do appreciate you. And I hope to see you all in the next video, which I might go ahead and film straight after this one. And yes, and that will be uploaded sometime in the near future. And thank you so much, guys, once again. And I will see you all in the next video. Bye, guys.